When I see a bird that walks like a duck, swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, I call that bird a duck. A Bumpstock equipped semi-automatic rifle fires automatically more than one shot, blah, 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 blah. There's a thing called a rail that looks very similar to a duck, swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, but actually isn't a duck. She's probably unaware that that analogy doesn't work, but there are things that look like a thing that are not actually a thing, just because you don't have the subject matter expertise to be able to properly identify it. Hey everyone, welcome back to the VSO Gun Channel. Thank you for tuning in. And I'm going to start off by saying something that I have said probably weekly for the last 6 years, and that is, it was never about the bump stocks. It was about how they banned the bump stocks. And the reason I bring that up is because, if you haven't noticed, the fear-mongering propaganda machine is in full operation. And we very well may have some new people here that were online looking for information on this. They may not have any idea what this is even about. And if you're one of those people, then welcome in. I'm going to run you through a synopsis of what really happened here. But if you hear nothing else from me, what I want to say to you is we need to go back to 5th grade civics class and remember that the legislature writes the laws. The executive enforces the laws, and the judicial branch interprets the laws. What you just saw here was the judicial branch interpreting the legislature's law as it applies to an action that was taken unilaterally by the executive to ban something that was outside of the congressional mandate. So, translation, what that means is the executive branch tried to do the job of the legislative branch because the legislative branch at the time wouldn't do it. So they said, you know what, we're just going to do it ourselves. And for the last several years, we have been fighting court over this because in America, the ends do not justify the means. We have a system of government that is built specifically to have checks and balances, and the check against writing of laws is that they are written by people who have to answer for their votes on those laws, not some unelected, installed bureaucrat there that's not beholden to anybody. What happened here is the Supreme Court went back through and said, hey, executive branch, that is outside your power to do. You cannot write law. You cannot make up law as you go along. So we're going to take a quick break to hear from today's sponsor, and then I'm going to show you what's actually in this thing. Quick service announcement for all of y'all. We have now 2 discount codes prepped up for you guys over at Mission First Tactical. One is for the all day everything stuff, everything from their backpacks to their drinkware to the holsters to even the new translucent magazines that they just came out with. Really like the purple ones, by the way. And then a second code that is for everything that is getting ready to go away, like 50 or 60% off in many cases. So you can find all that information over at the affiliates page, and special thanks to Mission First Tactical for making today's video possible. The court case is Garland V Cargill, and if you've been watching the channel for any length of time, you'll be intimately familiar with this lawsuit. The contention that the ATF used to ban these devices known as bump stocks is they claimed that they are machine guns, and that implicates a couple provisions of law, notably the National Firearms Act and the Gun Control Act. So those are the provisions that they were using to say, hey, these are banned. Well, there are several problems with that, besides the fact that machine guns are not banned in the United States. They're just highly regulated. So banning the manufacture of them is actually outside of law, period. And Justice Thomas, who penned this particular opinion, says Congress has long restricted access to machine guns. Has long banned, has restricted access, as in Congress has made it difficult to obtain machine guns. They have not made it illegal to obtain machine guns. They have just made it more difficult. So now, having laid that groundwork, the analysis begins on, is a bump stock actually a machine gun? And to do that, we have to look at the definition of machine gun, and I have this partially memorized. Firearm with the ability to shoot automatically more than one shot by single function of the trigger. And it also does like the parts. There's two important parts there. The first is single function of the trigger. And they go into analysis of what single function of the trigger is. And I might add that as a firearms professional, Clarence Thomas nails the function of the trigger analysis that we in the industry have been using for decades at this point in time, which is function of the trigger refers to the cycle of the trigger as a unit. When you initiate the sequence, what mechanically happens inside the firearm, and lays out how the trigger functions and why a semi-automatic rifle can not be a machine gun, and therefore a unaltered trigger mechanism by adding some kind of plastic thing over the gun that allows you to more quickly initiate that sequence does not meet the definition of machine gun. And the second bit here that's important is the automatically part, as in it does it by itself. Once you've initiated the machine in the machine gun takes over and you don't have to really do anything else. And we'll get a little bit more in depth in this when we look at the dissenting opinion, because it is clear to me that the justices that wrote the dissenting opinion have never actually fired a machine gun before. But basically, to lay out for you how this works, if you talk about a semi-automatic firearm, the gun is cocked and loaded and everything. When you pull the trigger, what you've done is disconnected the hammer bar from the sear on the hammer. The hammer then falls forward via spring tension, strikes the firing pin, the gun goes off, the action reciprocates, pushes the hammer down. The hammer is caught by a thing called a disconnector, and then if you let off of the trigger, the disconnector disconnects from the hammer and drops it back into the sear notch so that you can fire again. That is a semi-automatic gun. In a fully automatic gun, you have a secondary sear known as an auto sear, and it bypasses the disconnector. And the way that it does that, generally speaking, is it is timed on the bolt. So the bolt comes forward, touches the auto sear, and that drops the hammer. That ensures that the gun is actually closed so that you don't explode. What it results in is an inputless machine that continues to fire without any inputs from the user. And that is the definition of a machine gun as far as automatically is concerned. So you must have those elements to make a machine gun. A bump stock, simply put, does not do those things. It simply speeds up the rate at which the semi-automatic sequence can be initiated. The court and the ATF both agree that this is something that you can do without a bump stock. So the justifications for this are as follows. First, it does not fire more than one round by single function of the trigger. It does not do that automatically. It can be done without the device, and the ATF has also said in the past that they aren't machine guns and they flip-flop. So those are all of the reasons, kind of paraphrased for you, on why this is outside of current law. That said, if we go to the concurring opinion, Alito's FUD shows a little bit here, and he basically says, yes, he concurs with the opinion of the court, which is this is outside the bounds of the ATF to do. Congress needs to do their job. If the people actually want these things banned, they have to actually ban them by an act of Congress. The concurring opinion is like a paragraph long. We've got a lot of things to reference in this one, and just because of that, this is going to be a longer video by its nature. So let's go ahead and move forward to the dissent. This is penned by Sotomayor, and Kagan and Jackson sign on to it. Now, if I had to summarize this dissent, I would do it like this. Well, this is what they actually meant for it to be about. I have a real problem with the spirit of the law versus the letter of the law thing. If you want it to cover a thing, you best include it in the law. I got real problems with the liberties taken with broad statutes. So when it comes to this thing, In my opinion, as a firearms professional, it's very cut and dry. The trigger cycle is what matters. Does it allow for more than one round fired automatically or not? They think that it's like, oh, well, it's all in how fast you can get it done. The end result is what it comes down to. And that's not the way the law reads. These are all three very intelligent women. I'm sorry, you're reaching like really, really far. And to be completely frank, it's my opinion that you're actually lying through your teeth. Either that or you are ignorant of the histories or you've never read them related to the passage of the 1934 National Firearms Act, because it wasn't actually to ban guns of any kind. It was to institute a tax that they could nail gangsters on, because they assumed that the gangsters weren't going to have their tax stamps on them. Without a tax stamp, they could actually charge them with a crime that they didn't have the technology to actually pin on them at the time. What they're talking about is the difference between pulling a trigger and pushing the stock forward. And I'm sorry, what it comes down to is that is not part of the trigger mechanism. The mechanism of the trigger is what is defined in the law. So the push this or pull that thing, like, no. And to put that whole thing to bed, really, the argument is made in the main decision, the main opinion, excuse me, about the Model 37 shotgun. And the ATF was specifically queried on the Model 37. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Model 37, it is a pump action shotgun that allows you to fire the gun, hold the trigger, and pump the shotgun, and it will fire another round. And the ATF has held that that is not a machine gun, even though for single function of the trigger, so to speak, the gun technically will fire more than one round. That automatically thing that we talked about previously. So it requires additional input from the user, i.e. the pump. That's very similar to the forward force that is required in a bump stock. As Alito said, if you want to ban the bump stock, then pass a law to ban the bump stock. Now, in closing, there is something very juicy that I must put in here. This is Sotomayor admitting that AR-15s are common use weapons. Now, we all know this. This isn't like big news to most of us because the numbers speak for themselves. For an item to fall outside the scope of the Second Amendment's protections, it must not be a bearable arm. So if it is a bearable arm, it must also be dangerous and unusual. What Sotomayor has admitted here is that AR-15s, which is what she's referencing in that line, are common use. She's affirmed that they are common use, even though the numbers already say that. So it's not like breaking news, but to have that sort of thing put in black and white in a dissenting opinion will be used for decades to come. If I can leave you with a generalization of the dissenting opinion, I find it reaching and out of touch with reality. And I think that this juvenile statement made by her in this decision, and I'll read it for you now. When I see a bird that walks like a duck, swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, I call that bird a duck. A bump stock equipped semi-automatic rifle fires automatically more than one shot, blah, 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 blah. There's a thing called a rail that looks very similar to a duck, swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, but actually isn't a duck. She's probably unaware that that analogy doesn't work, but there are things that look like a thing that are not actually a thing, just because you don't have the subject matter expertise to be able to properly identify it. Anyway, that's all I got for you guys today. Sound off in the comment section down below. Let me know what you think on this, and we'll see you in another video here at the VSO Gun Channel.